Don't try to stop me now.
Alright guys, I'm back home now. I've got all my photos moved from my camera to my computer. I think I had about 500 photos in total, the majority of them being rolling photos. Out of those, I will probably have maybe 20 that are worthwhile. A lot of them are going to be blurry because I set my shutter speed to like a high shutter rate and then I let it fire. And the goal is to take as many photos as possible in hopes that we get some good ones out of it. I always check before I leave my photo shoot because I do not want to go home empty-handed and not have rolling photos to show for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of show you my editing workflow. I'm going to edit a still photo and a rolling photo for you, kind of show you what I do, how I like to do it, and hopefully kind of show you some tips and tricks along the way. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you kind of my editing workflow and how I like to do things. I'm not going to show you every single edit on every photo because I'll be here for a long time, but I figured it'd be kind of neat to show you a general overview of how I like to edit. I'll start with a still photo and then I'll edit a rolling photo as well, just so you can kind of see me work through it, see some of the things I would change and what I usually look for. So the way I like to do things, typically I go through and I will get rid of like blemishes and things that need to be touched up first before I do color correction and lighting, exposure correction. I find that if I do like color grading and stuff first, that I typically forget to do the simple stuff that would take me like less time. So first thing I'm going to do with this photo, if you zoom in here, you can see that there's like some of these blemishes in the background. I feel like they're kind of distracting and take away from the main subject. I'm pretty sure they're just birds. They were in some of the other photos. But what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go in and take the Smart Healing tool, the Content Aware Remove. Adobe makes it really easy to get rid of blemishes and stuff. So I remember before it was kind of a chore to go through and like copy and cut different sections of the sky to cover things up. Now they make it super easy. Just go through there, hit enter. I'm good to go. So that's all my blemishes out of the sky. I also like to go through and look at the ground as well. I know I've got some like rust spots and little patches in the ground. I'm going to go through and cover those up as well. For the most part, it's all pretty minor stuff, but I just like to do this because it doesn't really distract from the car at all. So I think that's my ground cleared up as well. So we're good there. I'm going to hit enter. Then I'm going to go back, zoom out. So now I think we're ready to start doing some color correction and lighting. I don't see anything else that stands out to me as far as distractions. So under normal circumstances, what I would do is I would go up to my presets that I've made over the years. I'd pick something that works good for this picture, and then I would kind of use that as my theme and run with it. But for the sake of showing you how I like to do things, I will start from scratch and kind of make my own edit on what I wanted to do with this. The colors on this are pretty cool to start with because mostly blues, lots of water, overcast. So I'm thinking that I'm going to kind of stick with that theme a little bit. I'll probably use some blue highlights and kind of mess with some of my tonal curves here. So to start with, I'm going to just get the exposure to a point where I can see the color on the car pretty decent. What I will typically do is mask out the car itself on top of everything else afterwards and kind of make sure that the color stays true to what it looks like in real life. Off the camera, this color looks pretty dark and not as red as it actually is. So I will go through and I will kind of change the color a little bit, but I really am a firm believer in keeping photos sort of how they look in real life. I'm not a big fan of over editing stuff or making the colors not look like they look in real life. So we'll try to make sure that we stay with that theme. But I'm going to go through here and get the lighting figured out. Probably not going to change too much a lot of what I'm going to do is going to be in the curves and the color grading where you'll start to see a difference. But I think for the most part, just get this evened out a little bit. Okay. And I'm going to save my curves for last. I get my colors where I want them, and then the curves will do a lot of the big changes for me. So I also want to make this just a touch bluer because my curve will change that after the fact. I'm going to go through here, my greens. I'm going to desaturate just a little bit. The grass where we were shooting was really green, so I'm assuming that once I start messing with the curves, that will show up as very green, like probably like highlighter green almost. I'm going to pull my yellows down a little bit as well. We're going to kind of make this grayscale-ish, but keep the color of the car red so that it pops. That's kind of what I'm going for here. So not really a whole lot of color corrections that I'm going to do, but I'm going to do some masking. I'm going to go through and I'm going to kind of sharpen up the road a little bit so that it looks a lot less like just a gray slab and has a little bit of definition to it. So I'm going to do that first with just a linear gradient. Probably start here and pull up so that it fades a little bit but doesn't get too far into the car, make my car look weird. Then I'm going to go down here to effects and I'm going to change the clarity just a little bit, not enough that it gets me made fun of. And I'm going to dehaze a little bit as well. So some of this will change once I go through the curves and I change the lighting curve, because what I'll typically do is kind of it'll look like an S curve, but it'll bring my lows down a little bit and then my like brighter areas up just a touch. So that way you get kind of a better contrast without it just looking like I crank the contrast way up. So let me go through here. And then that's probably about where I want that. I think that'll work. I'm also going to go through here and desaturate the road just a little bit, because typically when I dehaze, it's going to turn my road brown. And I don't really want that because I know most concrete doesn't really look brown. So by dehazing and then desaturating a little bit, that kind of keeps me from making my concrete look like dirt. So from there, that's my road. And next I'm going to move on to the upper half of the picture. So one thing I want to do with this picture is make my sky stand out a little more. Before all of this smart Lightroom stuff came out, I would just use a linear gradient, but now they've been kind enough to make me smart masks that will just detect the sky for me, which I think is awesome. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to add a mask to the sky, and it should highlight around the trees. Okay, we're good there. So now I want to pull, not so much that it makes the sky look artificial, but I want to kind of be able to see some of the overcast clouds that were there. So I'm going to pull my dark stuff down just a touch. Okay, and I've added this to my regular mask because my mask from down below has a lot of darker properties, and I want to do the same thing to the sky, so it all kind of works out. I'm probably going to turn my saturation up just a touch more so I keep some of that blue in the sky. And then from there, I'm all good. I've got my road where I want it, I've got my sky how I want it. I think I'm also going to go through and touch up my tree line here as well. I'm going to make a new mask for that. I'm going to just do a radial gradient. That'll allow me to just kind of highlight this here. I'm going to stretch this way out so that it covers all of the trees I want there. And thin it down and change the feathering just a touch. Because what I want to do here is I want to make that tree line look a little more like fall. Because right now it's very drab. So I'm going to go through, change my warmth a little bit, just enough so that it kind of adds a little touch of color. Yeah. So if I go back to my original, And then I look at that now, I've got a little more color there while also still kind of keeping my water blue, my sky blue. I think everything kind of meshes a little better there. So I think I'm going to change my warmth a little bit more, kind of give it that fall touch. We're good there. Alright, so from here, I'm going to go through and I'm going to mess with the curves a little bit. I'm not going to do too much with the red, green, and blue curves, but I'm still going to move them a little bit just to kind of get the colors exactly how I want them. Biggest change I'm going to do here is just kind of bring my dark tones down just a little bit. And the car is going to look underexposed, but I'm going to go through and change that with like a subject mask. So I'm going to pull my lows down a little bit and my highs up just a touch. And what this will allow me to do is kind of give me a little more definition on the ground and also keep my sky a little sharper while not really taking away from the car too much. So I'm also going to go through here and do the same thing with the parametric curve. Kind of pull down just a touch. Kind of get my sky back there. And then bring it down just a hair. There. So now I've got good color all around. My road's not going to stand out too much. And when I highlight the car, kind of bring the color out a little bit, it'll make it really pop, which will be good. I'm going to kind of experiment a little bit with the color curves here because I'm not 100% sure what I want to do with this. But I'm thinking that if I kind of add a little blue highlight to this, it'll kind of make it feel kind of how the weather felt out there because it's pretty cold. So what I don't want to do is change these curves so much that I can't get the color of the car back to normal. So I'm going to pull just a little bit, ever so slightly. And then for my blues here, I should be able to fix that right there. So I don't want my photo looking too yellow because then it's going to kind of look washed out. And I'm not going to have a whole lot of color. So I think I need to go back in my reds here. I'm going to move that a little less blue. So it probably isn't going to look a whole lot different, but basically what this is doing is just kind of evening out the colors that I want to see. So now from before, my water is a little bit bluer. My sky is a little bit more colorful, but not so much that it's, imitating a blue sky. So this gets my colors where I want. I am going to go back and bump my exposure up just a touch because moving the lighting curve down a little bit underexposed my photo too much. But now, if I go through, go to my masking, add a new mask for a subject, Lightroom is pretty smart and should be able to pick the car out of this, which I find pretty cool and extremely convenient. For years, I would have to go through and manually zoom in, highlight all the edges, fill in the middle. This saves so much time, it's ridiculous, and I'm extremely thankful that they've done that. So now I'm going to crank my shadows up just a touch, so now we can start to see some color and definition coming out of the car. I'm going to bring my saturation up just a touch, but what I don't want to do is saturate it so much that my windshield looks completely teal, which I'm not really a fan of because that's not really how it looks in real life. So I'm probably going to go through and isolate that at some point and kind of get my colors even on the car, but I want the car to stand out a little more than it has been from the rest of the photos. So I'm going to crank my exposure just a little bit, and now we'll be able to start to bring some of the color out of the car. So now that I got that like that, I'm going to hit enter, go through here. I'm going to go back down to my colors, and what I want to do is smooth out some of the color on the window so it doesn't look so teal. I'm going to kind of move the teal color slider here towards the blue side. And what that'll do is that'll keep my windows from looking like they're sea green, and I'll be able to kind of turn that down. Shouldn't affect anything else because most of the other colors that would be affected by that are just pure blue. So from there, not too bad. I'm also going to go into my magenta, and I'm going to turn that up just a little bit. And I'm going to go into my reds and turn that up probably a significant amount, because what I'm aiming to do here is get a lot of the car color to pop. So while it's not an extremely vivid color, this kind of gets us a little more of the car to pop out and kind of show the color than what we were getting before. So what I do want to avoid, I have kind of this weird grayed out color on the side of the car. And I know that's kind of how that's going to look regardless because of the reflections, but I'm going to try to minimize that a little bit. So if I go back into my mask and go through here, I'm going to turn my clarity down, and then I'm also going to turn my highlights down a little bit. So while at the end of the day that's not going to fix my problem, it'll kind of minimize some of that grayness. I'm going to turn my saturation up a little more just to try to minimize that. So I can't really add color where there's not very easily, but this way it still kind of makes it look how it looks in real life. I'm also going to go back and make my shadowing just a little less so that the car doesn't look so overpronounced. I think right there is a good balance. Last but not least, I'm going to go through, kind of size this down to where the car is centered. I'm going to just eyeball it. I think that right there gets me pretty close. Just a touch bigger. Yep, that's centered. And that's it. So, now that we got a still photo out of the way, I'm going to show you how I edit a roller. Now, you can see, for the most part, this will be a lot easier because all of the stuff that's not the car is very blurry. So there's not really a whole lot of touch-ups to do. I'll probably look around, kind of on the brighter spots of the photo and see if I have, dirt or something in the background that's going to be distracting. I know to most people they probably don't notice, but to me it bothers me to death when I see rollers that have, a very obvious sensor dust or something. And I've had it happen. I mean, there's only so much you can do to keep dust out of your sensor, but my rule of thumb is every time before I shoot rollers, I'm using my little turkey baster air tool, blowing the dust off the sensor so that way I'm not worrying about it in post and there's not a reason that I would miss stuff. But I did notice when I was looking at these earlier that I've got a little, well, yeah, I say that like it's going to show you, but I have what I think is an airplane in the background. I thought I had dirt on my sensor, and I was kind of frustrated that I was going to be fixing dirt on all my photos, but I think it's just a plane. I'm going to go through here. I'm going to take my heel tool, and I'm going to just really quickly get that out of there like it was never there. So we're good. Zoom back out. Now, what I typically do for rollers is pretty straightforward. I will typically take a linear mask, and I will highlight the road. I'll turn the clarity up just a touch and the texture up just a touch to kind of show some more definition of the road. You'll see these lines pop a little more. I feel like it kind of shows the motion a little better and also kind of helps draw your attention towards the car. I'm also going to go through and do the same thing I did with the still photos. I'm going to bring the brightness down on my sky a little bit so that you can see the definition of the clouds a little better. And I've also got kind of the start of a sunset, so I'm going to see if I can't make a little more color pop in the background. So same thing as before, I'm going to start with my lighting, move my way down to coloring, and then I'll do my masking from there. Before I get too deep into this too, just kind of how my workflow works with rollers, I usually end up taking probably 300 to 400 photos-ish, depending on how the shoot goes, that are just rollers. I just put it on like a high-speed shutter and let it go. Now, as a result, I usually end up with probably 300 photos, or probably like I'd say like 90% of my photos are junk. They're all blurry, but out of those 300 or 400, I usually get about 20 or 30 that are worth keeping. What I like to do is zoom in and look at my front headlights, and I want to make sure that those are sharp. I want to make sure that there's no blur in those areas. Uh, if there's blur, I usually discard the photo. Um, my main goal here is to show the motion and have everything be smooth and blurry except for the car. So um, it does irritate me when I see rolling photos where the car is blurry, because at the end of the day, that's not what needs to have motion. It's just the road. So I'm going to start with lighting here. I've actually kind of messed with it a little bit already to see what would work. I'm going to turn my exposure and my shadows up a little bit, but I'm actually going to turn my contrast and my highlights down. So I'm expecting, once I start doing the masks, that the upper half of the photo where my sky is and the lower half where the road is are both going to get darker. So I'm going to kind of focus on getting the color of the car brighter so that I can go through and manipulate that easier, while also keeping my color in the sky, keeping my road dark. So I've already kind of got my lighting set up a little bit. I'm going to actually go through here and do my parametric curve of my light first. I'm going to darken the road just a touch, and I'm going to bring up my sky just a little bit, and then I'm going to try to bring my highlights down there. So lighting should be pretty even now. Color temp I think is okay. I'm not going to mess with too much of the color now because I'm going to do a lot of that with my masks. I'm going to go through here, start a new mask, and I'm going to just start with my sky. That'll be my easiest thing to mess with. So I'm going to go through here, turn my highlights down just a touch to bring some of the color out, turn my clarity up a good bit so that I can see some of the definition of the clouds, and then I'm going to dehaze a little bit, just bring out a little more definition, and then I'm going to turn my saturation down because I don't want the sky to look not like what it looked like in real life. So this way we kind of exaggerate the darkness of the clouds a little bit so it can be easier seen, but we also don't make the sky look, blue or something kind of weird, because let's be honest, that's not what the sky looked like. The sky was really gray, not really much color to it, so this kind of fits that. What I also might try doing before I'm done editing the top half of this photo is go through and see if I can't make some of this like weak area where there was a sunset starting, make that a little more colorful so that maybe it pops just a little bit. I'm going to go through, add another mask, just a radial gradient here, and I'm going to start outside and bring my feathered area in. I'm going to try to capture that little orange area. I'm going to just experiment a little bit, turn my colors a little brighter. I want it to look a little more red, so I think just making the warmth a little more and adding some, magenta tint to it, I think that works okay. I'm going to zoom in, make sure I don't have anything goofy here. Yeah, I think that works okay. It's minor, but at the end of the day, it's not. I feel like it's worth doing just to kind of add a little more color, because if we're being honest, this photo doesn't really have a whole lot of color. So aside from the motion, there's not really that like wow factor. But I'm going to go in here, I'm going to go to my color mixer. I'm going to try to turn my reds up just a little bit and bring the car out. Most of that will be done with the masking. And then I don't want to bring too much out of the cornfield, but I do want to bring a little more of that yellow tinge from the cornfield. And then I'm going to make my grass a little more visible as well. So that works there. Now, I'm going to go through. I'm going to go to my color grading. I'm not actually going to change any colors, but what I'm going to do is make it so that my lighting on my midtones is a little darker. So I kind of get a little more definition out of the darker spots of the photo. And then I'm also going to turn up my shadows just a touch. Okay, everything should be pretty evenly lit now. So I'm going to go through, make a new mask. This time I'm going to try to focus on the road. Because there's a lot of motion on the bottom half of the photo, ooh, don't do that. Linear gradient. There we go. Because there's a lot of motion on the bottom half of the photo, I don't have to worry too much about changing lighting over the wheels. You're not going to be able to really see anything on the wheels themselves. So I'm going to just kind of make this gradient pretty wide. That way there's still some, you can't really tell where the editing like breaks. Because the last thing I want to do is have like a hard line where it shows my ground is really dark and then it just like immediately gets brighter. That's not going to look natural. So what I'm going to do here, turn my clarity up a good bit, and I'm going to dehaze a touch, turn my texture up as well, and you can see immediately, I mean, mind you, it's a little exaggerated, but now I can really show off that there's this like, huge motion going on right now. It looks like we're flying. So I go through, stiffen that up just a touch, and then I'm also going to go back to my color for this mask, and I notice the road looks a little green, so I'm going to turn my magenta slider up just a touch to kind of counteract that. So now it looks about the color the concrete would look in real life. Maybe just a touch more. So we're good there. And then I'm going to move this just a little bit, kind of see where it starts covering the car. And I'm going to just move this up so that it gets me as close to the car as possible, but doesn't actually take away from the color of the car since I've changed the color of the road. So we're good there. Last thing I need to do is just kind of focus on the car. It should be smart enough to select it even though it's moving. Yep, good to go. I'm going to turn my shadows up just a little bit, kind of bring that red out. I'm going to turn my saturation up as well. I don't want to make it so bright that it's obvious that I was messing with it, but I do want to kind of show off that rich red color of the car a little better. I go through and mess with my colors just a touch. I think that kind of makes it pop. I'm going to save that mask, and I'm going to also go back to my teal slider, and I'm going to get rid of that, sea green color on the window to kind of make it look a little more natural. And I'm going to turn my clarity up just a tiny bit, and then I'm done. So what I would typically do from here then is make a preset out of this, and then I would apply it to each photo and then go through and edit each photo with that preset as a template, but kind of working off that. So that way, in a sense it's cheating, but at the same time, I'm not trying to spend more time on these edits than I need to, because at the end of the day, somebody's waiting for these photos. So I don't want to prolong it any more than I need to. But from there, that's really it. I'll go through, I'll edit these photos the same way I did this, and we'll get them back to the customer. So I think that pretty much wraps this up for this photo shoot. I appreciate you guys tagging along. Hopefully you learned something. I'm thinking that this will probably be one of the last photo shoots I have for this year since winter's pretty much right around the corner. But next year I'll have a lot more shoots, I'm sure. Bring you guys along for those and show you what I do. So hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you enjoyed what you saw. And I appreciate you guys sticking around. And thank you for watching.